pieces there that can be kind of used to texture a little bit later. I'm going to look at it, and obviously, we don't want to see this section right here. So this has kind of a flow to it. Just kind of lay this out a little bit, just kind of get an idea of just proportionally what I have and what I'm working with. Just shift this one over. And then so this is kind of do something like that. So I'm going to work some rock in here, but now I've got kind of the wood here, and he's got some smaller pieces I can kind of work in a little bit later. So kind of the two sections. If you notice, there's something in aquascaping called the golden ratio. So when you look at something that's like a 2/3 and a third proportion, and it's just the way we kind of visually process things that keeps things, I like to call it easy on the eyes. So if you took this, and if you just kind of, like, you've got another piece here, and if you notice my line kind of here in the center, it's not dead center on the tank. So it's kind of like right here off to the side a little bit. This would be kind of the weight of everything, and this would be a little bit less here. Ideally, I would like to, and I may kind of work this around a little bit differently. That works a little bit better. I also recommend having more materials than you need sometimes, which makes it a little bit easier, but we'll work with what we've got here. Also, too, when you're looking at your aquarium and you're ever wanting to prepare for an aquascaping contest, it's really normal as we're aquascaping, we're looking at it from above. We're kind of seeing it from this perspective. But I recommend getting a chair, get something here, so when you're looking at it, you can get your eye focused. Your line of eyesight's right in the middle. So if you're going to take a picture of it, you're going to enter in the contest, that's going to be kind of your frame of reference right there. One thing I'm seeing here, if you look at, I have it that I don't like, is everything here is at the same height. Like this point, and this point is here. So I need to create some variation with that. And maybe bring a little bit like this, kind of pointing that in. So before I had everything kind of pointing out like that, so now I'm going to want to pay a little bit more attention. Optically, it kind of looks a little bit like that. We'll shift this one over. Like so. And then kind of frame that in a little bit. So I'll get start working some rock in here. You get an idea of what we got here. So these are two of my larger rocks, and so I don't want to really have everything, all the big rocks on one side. So I'm going to take, also too, when you look at the rock, see how that has kind of a hard, flat edge? That's not the most attractive side of that rock. You can also kind of see how the rock flows. So if I'm looking at that, it's got kind of an angle to it. So if I was to put this piece here on this side, I've got a hard, straight edge. It's going to make it a little bit more challenging to work with, unless I've got smaller stones to blend that in. And this is here, so that's really kind of, this little indentation here is giving this rock some depth as I place it in here. So it actually kind of worked out. And also too, if you notice how that piece of wood just happened to sit right there, there's a little bit of a natural relationship between this kind of coming across and this over here. So you can almost, a lot of times, look for like little nooks and crannies. Like this piece here, if you shift it a little bit, it almost locks in right there. So it looks like that piece of root was naturally growing down that kind of little recessed area of that rock right there. So there's little details like that. But just kind of as you're going through the process, just think what would look naturally. Think about if you're out on a hike or a walk and in nature and what you're seeing and how the roots and all the plants and rocks and everything relate to one another. Yeah, I'm just kind of keeping mindful of that center line there. You've got kind of the same thing here where this rock here is a little bit taller, but this piece goes up. I can bring this one over the edge like that. One thing I'm kind of seeing a little bit right here is that, you know, this area here, I'm going to see what rocks we have, but that's where that wood was cut right there. But for me, this is kind of the most natural way to place it right here, right now. So I'm going to pick up a little bit. Almost like it needs to go down a little bit. And if we can put that back. And then maybe I can get something going here with this. Yeah, see what I was about to do there kind of really takes away from that. Like if I just plunk that, that's not necessarily it just doesn't really fit right there, more of a natural pattern. So let's pull that one back out and revisit that. This one here. Piece is a little too flat. It doesn't really, like, if you look at how I had that, it's kind of flat. We got some height there, so it's a little off balance. You don't want it too symmetrical, but kind of like balance without symmetry. So now I just got a couple of rocks here to make this work. Let's see here, now there's final. Now, what I could, it's not going to work there either. Going to kind of terrace that there a little bit just to give us again a little bit more depth and texture, so it's not too flat right there, and it's not just these. I'm limited on the rock pieces I have, which I'm not making any excuses, but this, instead of just keeping this open, is going to give that a little bit more detail right there. back here. Trying to get a little bit of depth and height. Working it in. See how that looks from the front. So again, just keeping flat, kind of working that piece in right there. Gets this a little busier to kind of help support this weight on that side right there. This is again kind of an awkward rock here, but maybe there's a way I can incorporate it. It's also a little bit different color, but same texture, which over time may not be such a bad thing. But to give this side a little bit more weight over there, because this is a little bit heavier. A little bit bigger, and maybe like to break that rock. So okay, down to the last few rocks here. Let's see. Now I'll kind of do a little bit smaller version of this kind of over here to kind of balance it out. A little bit of space right there, so. And that piece is, this piece is back a little bit further, so I brought this one up front a little bit more to give it some depth. And there's a few, this piece here, I don't really, could go, but this is kind of a different kind of wood too, but it's a little too spindly just for my own personal preference to use this. It just looks a little bit out of place unless I had a lot of this. So if you had a lot of this type of wood, another technique that you could do is actually just take this and use, and I'll see where you go. You could use it like for some detail pieces like that. But you really need a lot more of it to get effective with it. So I'm just going to hold what I got right there. This piece here, if you notice, is kind of standing alone. You can, it's kind of very visually have these two pieces here. There's some detail. So this
could use a little bit more support to it. And I'm going to look at this and kind of see how it flows. This is flowing back that way, but I'm maybe seeing it more this way. We're kind of flowing everything a little bit more towards the center. One thing that my eye sees right here that's maybe kind of hard to see from right there is that, well, that's not such a bad thing, but sometimes you want to be careful when you're getting different line, like with your wood, different lines. Like that's not, if you're looking
from the front, you can kind of see how this piece of wood here is in front of this piece of wood.
From the front, and what is to use this piece of wood to create some depth. And obviously, you're not going to really see that side of it that much. That's kind of going against the way the natural flow of that piece of wood. And then maybe I can find, just for the sake of doing it, A little, if I can just get this to support up a little bit better. Let me get this from the front. I really don't want to go back there with it. And I'm actually just going to get this little twig out of our way. Okay, one final piece here to see if this can be. So with this scape, if I was to plant this, obviously this is kind of a transition area. If we had more rocks, we could kind of build up some detail stones in here. This rock also can be broken up very easily to create more of a texture to it. So this is a little bit more of what I'd call it the macro phase of the layout. Again, so we're just, time and everything else, we're a little bit limited. But even if we take like some of these smaller stones, just to kind of show you an example, there's one over here. Let's see, I got a couple. Actually, I got a couple more over here. So. You could go with something back here, but if you're going to plant, this is just going to end up getting lost. So since I am a little bit limited, that's going to maybe kind of help take my eye off that line a little bit there. And then what this is doing here, it's kind of breaking it up. So if this was like a pathway, this isn't such just a straight flat line right there. You see I'm just going to take that rock. It's got that flat edge. So it creates a little bit more visual detail to that space right there. And then if we take, let's see here. Kind of bring that over there. Again, I'm always kind of, as I said in the very beginning, kind of being mindful of that substrate line in the front. It's easy. You kind of, sometimes your eye kind of wants to balance everything out on both sides. And again, depending on what plants you're going to use, will kind of frame everything in. Back a little bit with that there. And again, if I had a whole bunch of these little crushed up pieces of dragonstone, you could get a little bit more creative. Actually, by taking some of the smaller stones, if you've got your larger ones up front, you could take some of these smaller ones and place those kind of towards the back a little bit. And again, you can kind of pull depth back like that. It's going to kind of make when you have something larger in the front and kind of smaller in the back, your eye's going to want to kind of travel more towards the back of the scape. A whole bunch of those would have been really nice. And then I've got this one last piece of wood here. And it may or may not work, but let's see if I... That might make that spot a little bit too heavy. But these pieces are kind of looking a little bit like just 1, 2. So if I can use this to kind of break that line up a little bit. Obviously, keep in mind you can do the same thing with plants. Okay, that's not like a perfect situation, but kind of what I did there was also, we had that hard line right there, that piece of wood was cut, but by just kind of facing that down in there like so. And also too, this was a little bit of a flat, not a little bit, but a lot of a flat line right here. So by placing this piece here, we picked up again with some more depth to the aquarium as well by having that smaller piece right there. We've got 2 other smaller stones. And give that guy a little bit of a support there. That's also too where like a little paintbrush or something like that can be good for sanding it in. So now when I look at this, with the materials we have, I'm happy with it. So if I was to plant this, what I would first thought would be is if this was going to be a more of a hardscape based layout and not so much maybe as a high-tech planted aquarium, you can kind of do what's called greening. So if you're not wanting to get into soils and be as committed initially to lots of frequent water changes depending on the soils that you're using, you could kind of come in and texture in these lines here with like, let's say Anubias nana petite. So anywhere where you see these lines kind of between the rock and the wood is a little place asking for plants to be put. So kind of all right, you know, on all these areas right here, I would keep this open. And if we were to do that, you know, this is kind of a void right back here, but this could be, you know, this actually in hindsight, if I had another piece of wood to go right here, would fill it out a little bit better because I've got this void back there. But just filling in with like bucephalandras, different mosses and things to kind of texture this whole thing up. And if it was to be a little bit more of a high-tech planted tank, these back areas could be filled in with different stem plants. So you've got your foreground, kind of a mid-ground plant, and then you've got your background stem plants kind of framing this whole thing in on the back side over here. And then from then, once you have your plants in there, then you can kind of, that's something else I do, is people a lot of times go, well, what kind of fish are you going to put in there? Well, I don't know what kind of fish I'm going to put in there till we're done. If you look at Aquarium Design Group's social media or our website, you'll see that there's always kind of an intention of what we're doing. So the hardscape will speak to us, the choice of plants, and then you can often, what I'll do is the fish will kind of speak to me. Okay, this fish is going to look right. The shape of this fish is going to have a sense of purpose with these plants and the lines and the angles and everything else in here. So there you have it. Thank you. Any questions? No? But Sean still did a good job. All right, thanks everybody.